special meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order at 6:06 PM. Item number 2, we got to read this first. At this time, I'd like to call the Special Committee of the Whole as a preliminary matter. This is Mayor Pro Tem Glotz speaking before we get started. I would like to ask that anyone joining us remotely, please be patient and respectful as we navigate this meeting remotely. In order for this meeting to run smoothly, speaking out of turn or inappropriate comments to be made or posted electronically will not be tolerated. As this is a special meeting, all comments must be germane as possible to items on the agenda in order to keep the meeting moving forward in an orderly fashion. At this time, allow me to confirm that all members and persons anticipating on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond that you are present. President Vandenberg.
Here.
Clerk Therian.
Present.
Trustee Berg.
Present.
Trustee Brady.
Present.
Trustee Brennan.
Present.
Trustee Galante.
Present.
And Trustee Mueller. Present. Thank you. Staff, when I call your name, please respond that you are present. David Niemeyer.
Present.
Pat Carr.
Present.
Laura Gadet.
Present.
Village Attorney Paul O'Grady.
Present.
Donna Framke. Paula Walrick. Kimberly Clark. Priscilla Cordero. Matt Walsh.
Present.
Hi, Matt. Forrest Reeder.
Present.
Hi, Forrest. John Urbanski.
Present.
Brad Bettenhausen.
Present.
Andrew Brown.
Present.
Hannah Lippman. Good evening, everyone. I thank you in advance for your patience and cooperation throughout tonight's Committee of the Whole meeting, which is convening remotely via GoToMeeting. This open meeting of the Village of Tinley Park is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Pritzker's Executive Order 2020-07, issued on March 16, 2020, which suspends the Open Meetings Act provisions relating to an in-person attendance by members of a public body. Specifically, the governor's order suspends the requirement in Section 2.01 that members of a public body be physically present, and 2, suspends the limitations in Section 7 on when remote participation is allowed. On April 30th, 2020, Executive Order 2020-33 reissued Executive Order 2020-07. In order to mitigate the transmission of the virus and reduce risk of COVID-19 illness, Executive Order 2020-07 furthermore encourages public bodies to postpone public business when possible. Therefore, tonight's agenda has been kept to a minimum. The Open Meetings Act requires public bodies to allow for public comment. This meeting will feature public comment. Members of the public interested in commenting at this meeting were asked to provide their comment in writing via email or through the drop box at the Village Hall by noon today. They may also have requested to be called via telephone during the public comment item. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by web audio conference. All the materials for this meeting are available on the village's website, and we recommend the members and the public follow the agenda as posted. Before turning to the first item on the agenda, allow me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to assure accurate meeting minutes. I, Mayor Pro Tem Glotz, will introduce each speaker on the agenda After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response or comment on any item, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and always state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. After members have spoken, I will afford public comment as follows. The public was provided an opportunity to submit comments until noon today by emailing their public comments to clerk's office at tinleypark.org or by placing their written comment in the drop box at Village Hall. The public was also provided the opportunity to submit a request until noon today to the clerk's office at tinleypark.org or by placing their written request in the drop box at the Village Hall to participate publicly via a live telephone call at the relevant portion of the public meeting. A village representative will call the provided telephone number and allow the phone to ring not more than 4 times. If the call is not answered within those 4 rings, the call will be terminated. If answered, the participant will be allowed to participate telephonically. The public comment should be presented in a manner as if participant is in attendance. At the meeting, at the start of the call, the participant should provide their name and any other information the participant wishes to convey. For comments regarding agenda items, identify and include the special agenda item number. The participant should try to address all comments to the public body as a whole and not to any member thereof. Repetitive comments are discouraged. The total comment time for any single participant is 3 minutes. Further time, up to an additional 3 minutes, may be granted by a motion. A participant may not give his or her allotted minutes to another participant to increase that person's allotted time. Finally, each vote taken at this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Trustee Berg.
Yes.
Trustee Brady.
Here.
Trustee Brennan.
Present.
Trustee Galante.
Here.
Trustee Glatz.
Present?
Trustee Mueller.
Here.
President Vandenberg.
Present.
Item number 2. Consider moving item number 2, adjourn to executive session, to item 4B of this agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
You please call the roll?
Trustee Berg.
Yes.
Trustee Brady.
Yes.
Trustee Brennan.
Yes.
Trustee Galante.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Glatz.
Yes.
Trustee Mueller.
Yes.
Thank you. Item number 3, discuss proposed spending reductions due to COVID-19 pandemic. Dan?
Trustee Glatz?
Yes?
President Pro Tem Glatz, I'm going to just make a few opening comments and then turn it over to Andrew.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Tonight, we want to get your feedback on a new revenue and spending plan for the 2020-21 budget year. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has upended municipal budgets, and we all are quickly adjusting to the emergency situation that we are in. We have been discussing developing worst-case temporary spending reductions since late March. And with the virus progressing and many of our business continuing to stay closed, we have asked our departments to develop emergency plans to reduce their budget 20%, with the focus on maintaining core services. I am proud of the work our staff has done in making some very difficult but necessary decisions. Tonight, we want to review this new spending plan. Not all of the departments were reduced 20%, as you'll see, but I think we made some significant reductions but maintained core services. I would recommend that for the next 6 months that we review this new spending plan with the board every 2 months and make adjustments as necessary. And if adjustments do need to be made before that, the board trusts us to do what's appropriate. Finally, some may question, why now? Why not wait a few months to see whether our revised revenue projections are right? The answer is if we wait that long, we may have to make more drastic temporary reductions that would impact our core services. So now I'm going to turn it over to Andrew Brown to review our new revenue estimates as well as a summary of capital project deferrals and operating reductions, which does not include personnel, which will be discussed in closed session.
Thank you very much. I've prepared a PowerPoint for this evening so that we can go over these items and have something to reference. Most of the detail is included within your packet, so if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask them as we go through. I'm going to go over a brief general review of where we see the general fund revenue at, specifically looking at the projected reductions we have, and then I'll turn it over to Brad Bettenhausen to give some further detail to those line items. Again, on the first slide, you'll see that we've got our projected impacts, again, for just the general fund revenue on this slide. The first major revenue stream being that of property tax will be collected, but payments and distributions may be delayed. Again, at this time, we don't know what that looks like per se, but again, the village does get what it levies on an annual basis. The projected reductions are listed to our to certain taxes and licenses in the effect that our projections are conservative, and as where we stand currently with what we know today. Again, if the stay-at-home orders and shelter-in-place continue to be extended, we would expect these projections to grow in the amount that would be reduced. Brad, I'd like to turn it over for you if you'd like to take the tax reductions.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, sales taxes, of course, we had half a month of relatively normal sales in March, and April and May now, because of the sheltering, will be severely reduced, being that most businesses were closed or operating on a very reduced scale. We will start to see those numbers in the tax receipts we will receive in June. So again, we just know what is occurring now, but we won't see the impact until later. Excuse me. Obviously the home rule sales tax is going to be equally impacted. And even once we come off of the sheltering, our ability to move about the cabin freely is still going to be restricted. So again, I think it's going to take a while before our businesses recover back to a pre-closing normalcy. And so we're projecting sales tax revenues probably to be off about 40% for the year. Use taxes, I've reflected it to be down about $500,000. However, as I've noted in my more detailed presentation of the revenue, there is two things at force here in play. is the state has enacted some legislation that requires more of your online retailers and out-of-state retailers to collect a sales tax, the state's use tax, which offsets the fact that sales in general probably will be reduced with people being out of work and looking to curtail spending. So it could be a wash, but again, I'm still anticipating some decrease there. Income taxes, Illinois Municipal League is expecting that to be off about 15%. I am feeling that number is probably on the low side, again based on unemployment, and with corporate earnings then being down as well. Amusement tax, I don't foresee us having a music theater season at all this year. And so therefore the revenues that we had projected there, last year's revenues of $1.1 million, we won't see that at all. Video gaming, of course, has been closed since the middle of March. That is going to have an impact, and I think I would not be surprised if some of our restaurants do not come back after the sheltering is over. And so therefore some of our current licensed gaming locations will be dark. And again, that will take a while before it recovers. On our liquor licensing, we of course have changed the schedule on that to be just an annual renewal. The normal 6-month renewal for July through December, we have waived this year because of the COVID crisis and the business closure to give our restaurants and bars a little bit of a break there. And obviously there'll be a decrease in the video gaming license. As Andrew has shown here, about $11 million impact to the revenues that we had expected in the fiscal 21, which is roughly 19.3%, rounded figures, 20% of the expected revenues. Our budget as approved basically was slightly more than a break even, means that there was just a little bit of revenue coverage beyond the expenditures. So really to stay in line with the expected reduction in revenues, we really needed to be targeting roughly a 20% decrease in our expenditures, which quite candidly was coincidental to what we had initially gone and asked the department heads to re-examine their budget requests. That, like I say, we had requested them to reduce by 20% before we had actually known had extended the impact on the revenues. Again, on motor fuel tax, with the sheltering, there is less vehicles being driven, less fuel being purchased. Again, Illinois Municipal League is looking at roughly a 15% off of last year's revenues. That's about a $0.6 million impact. Our local road fund is also going to be impacted. Again, similar to the property tax, the delay in the issuance of the vehicle stickers is not going to have a huge impact other than cash flow wise. But our red light cameras, again, with less traffic, perhaps there's less fines, and we were also having people that are not paying the fines. And that is not considering the impact if we chose to allow the contract to lapse at the end of the year. Probably one of our bigger areas of impact impacted by this crisis is the hotel motel fund, where our hotels now are operating at 5 to 10% occupancy, where they had previously been at 75% or better in general. Looking at about a $1.5 million impact there, or roughly 83% of the revenue. and it is the motel tax fund that funds the majority of our marketing department efforts. So there is a direct correlation there. Water and sewer fund won't have a huge impact. We have, as you know, we have waived the assessment of the late fees during the period of the crisis, and we have suspended water shutoffs for the time being. But the amounts due for water use it remains due. We have noticed an uptick in people not paying as a result, taking advantage of the situation, and we have actively started with marketing to promote the idea that if you can't pay the full amount, pay something, so that you don't create yourself a hill too high to climb. Excuse me. Commuter parking fund also heavily hit, but again, not one of our major funds. But Metro has reported that their ridership at one point was down 97% compared to previous periods. We have waived the parking fees for April and for May during the sheltering. Our daily pay parking, which we can track, was averaging last week about 31 cars a day. This week it actually upticked a little bit to 39. So a few more people seem to be coming back to taking the train. But again, those numbers are very low, and we don't know exactly when that will recover. We largely suspect that a lot of people who had been using the commuter services will find alternate means to get downtown, probably driving or carpooling with other people for a period of time, which will again continue to impact our revenue streams there. So there's almost a $3 million impact on the non-operating funds, and overall about $14 million impact to the village for the fiscal year. Unless there's any questions, I'll pass it back to Andrew.
Seeing no questions,
I'll go around. Does Trustee Berg, do you have any questions?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Trustee Brady?
Nothing.
Trustee Brennan?
Nothing at this moment.
Trustee Galante?
Not right now.
Trustee Mueller?
Just with the delays from getting the taxes from county, state, feds, any cash flow issues that we should anticipate, or are we okay with?
So-
cash on hand?
basically that's what our reserves function, that's their main purpose. Again, that we're talking outside of capital reserves, our unrestricted fund balances bridge the gap of when we are waiting on those revenue streams, specifically for property taxes, because we're in two different counties. They come in at different times, but we do have sufficient cash flow to get us through there.
Perfect, thank you.
Clerk Therian?
And I would say that is one of the primary reasons why we have those reserves is to address the short-term cash flow issues, such as a delay in property taxes, such as a delay in receiving certain revenues. Obviously, it's taken us nearly 40 years to build the reserves to the levels that Andrew and I have mentioned in recent conversations. And if we were to spend them out, they would be very difficult to rebuild again in a short period of time.
Thanks, Brad. Clerk Therian?
I have nothing at this time, thanks.
President Vandenberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really quick, Brad and Andrew and the rest of the finance team, thank you for putting together this in relatively short notice. My only question, I suppose, would be, given the shortfalls that we're going to have in some of the key buckets, do we have any projections on a recapture of how long or what the period of time it would be to bring ourselves to a back to normal phase? I mean, we're going to be catching up for quite a long time, I presume. Have we talked internally at all about what the potential recapture time to make ourselves whole again?
Thank you, Mayor Vandenberg. Yes, we have talked about this on a daily basis, I think. And as you know, the governor on it, what seems now to be a weekly or biweekly basis, tends to move that target. So unfortunately, until we actually have a stop date of when we know that things are going to reopen, that's really the denominator in the equation of what we could see to start projecting a rebound from. And, you know, again, going back to what Manager Niemeyer was talking about earlier, we've been at this for the better part of 6 weeks, working with the department heads. And in that 6-week time frame, the governor's changed the shelter-in-place order on 2 different occasions, which again skews our approach each time it gets extended, because we know that there is a loss every 30 days that the shelter-in-place is still an order that's effective. There's a monetary loss not only to businesses that are non-operational, as well as those businesses that are operating within the confinements of the current restrictions. So until we really know when we will be, you know, on our way to restoring the state as the plan stated, we can't really quantify the bounce back period if we don't know when the loss period will end.
Trustee Glatz, can I ask a question?
Fair enough. My other question would be fairly simple. I think I heard the manager's opening statement and his feelings on the conversation of cuts. I'd like to hear the position of the treasurer's office. Do we think that this type of aggressive path in a relatively short period of time is something that is necessary at this time, or is this something that you feel is the appropriate measure given the circumstances and proceeding forward?
Well, again, we've been at this for 6 weeks, and our original ask of 20% reduction we felt was necessary at that time to provide us some cushion. But because of the ever-changing landscape, that 20% now lines up with where our current revenue projections land. And again, if the orders keep on extending, that's going to impact our revenue negatively. However, I think as using a phasing approach to the temporary reductions that are proposed right now, that not only gives us the flexibility to make the needed changes up front so we don't have to make deeper cuts on the back end, as well as giving ourselves the flexibility when we do achieve some normalcy and our revenues start to return, that we can return those service levels to where they were prior to the COVID pandemic.
Thank you, Andrew.
I would concur with Andrew's summation there. Thank you.
Probably took the words right out of your mouth, Brad.
Pretty close.
Go ahead, Andrew.
All right, thank you. Without these marionette strings from Mr. Bettenhausen getting in the way here, I'm going to move on to the capital section of our presentation here. It's the second document in the packet. The capital spending plan in front of you has 3 columns. The first of which will show what was approved in the fiscal 21 budget. The second column are the deferrals or reductions of the project. Again, we went back to the department heads and asked them to reprioritize what they were approved to do project-based this year, so that we don't raid the cupboard effectively and do all of our capital in one year and scale back. So there's some capital that we can do in the coming year, not knowing what our capital reserves are going to look like in '22. Working with the team, they were able to reduce or defer 14.1 million of the 52.2 million of capital that was approved. Of this, 38.1 million of projects that are programmed to continue in fiscal '21. Staff considers 23.6 million of those critical, and the remaining 15.6 million of that as a needed, in that it could be deferred short-term, but there could be a position where this deferral may end up actually having the need to be done in the current year, or could be deferred for maybe another fiscal year, but something that needs almost immediate attention. And if you look in that last column there that's marked spending plan, you'll see what would be the amount that we would proceed with in fiscal '21 for capital. Any of the amounts that are in orange would be the items that the departments declared as a need and not a must. So essentially, these are items that they are going to try and defer as long as they can, but as they come up, we may need to do some of these. If there's any questions or comments regarding what's been deferred or programmed for FY21 from capital, I'd be happy to take some of those questions now.
Andrew, do you have, you still have a lot to go through?
Not necessarily. We can
Would
pick
you
up the
just
pace.
rather, would it be easier if we just wait till you're completely done?
Well, at this point, I'm ready to move on to the part where the departments can come in, and we can go department by department and ask any questions we have based on what's in front of you.
Diane, do you want to do it department by department, or would you rather do it now? The question you have.
No, my question's not. I can wait till the end.
Continue?
Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Moving on. So the projected impact of the operating fund departments, what we're focusing on this evening in this presentation is the operations budget of each department, which excludes personnel benefits and employer costs. And that totals about 13.5 million for the general fund. Staff worked very hard to reduce these amounts by just under $2.5 million, which was about 18.5% of that total budgeted amount. So the proposed spending plan for the general fund is approximately $11 million. Each slide, each row within this slide is representative of each of the departments that are within the general fund. The first being the mayor and trustee account. The operating budget was approved for just over $72,000. Reductions were made of almost $15,000, or a reduction of about 21%. Are there any questions regarding the reductions in the mayor trustee operating budget? Moving on to the village manager's budget. The operational portion of that was just over $131,000, with a proposed reduction of just under $35,000, or 26.41%. At this point, we would be in the larger packet, in case anyone's following along. Okay, good. Next would be the village clerk's budget, just under $98,000 for operations, with a proposed reduction of $15,700, or 16.5%. The general overhead budget is just over $2.4 million. We were able to reduce it $118,850, or a reduction of 4.9%. The operations for finance accounted for just under $112,000. We were able to reduce that by $41,650, or 37.2%. The IT fund budgeted at $665,832. We were able to reduce that just under $96,000, or 14.39%. Next, the next slide is the divisions within the police department. The police department admin is just under 1.2 million, was able to reduce their budget 40,410, or a reduction of 3.38%. Crime prevention operations are budgeted just over 30,000. They were able to reduce that budget by just under $8,400, or by a reduction of 27.86%. Crime-free housing operations are budgeted at $7,600. We were able to reduce it by $2,500, or a reduction of just under 33%. The patrol division operating budget at $387,426 was reduced at just over $68,000, or a 17.58% reduction. Investigations for police operations was budgeted at $140,825, and the proposed reduction is $12,500, or 8.8%. The DARE budget for operating purposes is just over $10,000. They were able to reduce that budget by $10,000, which is a 99.21% reduction. And the music theater operating budget is $9,450. There was no proposed reduction to that amount, and a 0% reduction overall. Are there any questions on the police divisions? Fire suppression is budgeted at just under $890,000. They were able to reduce it to $221,850, or a reduction of just under 25%. Fire prevention operations are budgeted at $102,385, with a proposed reduction of $46,455, or just under 46%. The EMA budget was for operations is $729,000. They were able to reduce it just under $115,000, or by 15.72%. Public Works Road and Bridge had a budget of just over $3.5 million. They were able to reduce it $703,100, or about 19.74%. The electrical division for Public Works budget was $512,000. We were able to reduce that by just over $121,000, or 23.64%. Public Works building maintenance, just over $1 million budgeted. They were able to reduce it just over $322,000, or 30.4%. The Community Development Department operating budget was $66,831. They were able to reduce it $4,775, or 70%. The Building and Zoning operations budget was $338,532. They were able to reduce it just under $115,000, or 34%. The Planning Department was budgeted for just over $194,000. They were able to reduce it just over $13,000, or a 6.77% reduction. The Economic Development Division was budgeted at $67,595. They were able to reduce their operating budget by $31,350, or 46.38%. The Marketing Department's operational budget was just over $700,000, and they were able to decrease that by just under $340,000, or 48.47%. And the Village Bus Service operating budget was $20,740, with no reduction proposed and 0% reduction recorded. At this time, I'd be willing to take any questions as it pertains to the operating departments of our general fund divisions.
Are you completely done?
Yes.
Okay, I'll go first, and then we'll go down the line. My thoughts on the proposed budget is the employees are the heart and soul of the village. And with employees still receiving benefits, I don't see how just reducing hours is that big of a savings. If anything, not only will we have reduced hours, but I think it could potentially reduce productivity and possibly lower their morale. Me personally, I think we should start the cuts from the top and reevaluate the employees at a later date. You know, we could discuss personnel in executive session, but cutting employees is their hours, to me, is the last thing that I would want to do. I don't know how everyone else feels, but we'll go around the table. Trustee Berg.
I agree with you 100% on that.
Thank you, Cindy. Trustee Brady.
I have to agree with both of you.
Okay. Trustee Brennan.
I mean, I agree with you 100%, Trustee Glatz. A couple things that I took away from, what Brad said is that, it took us 30 years to build up our actual reserve. We have this money available. I think, the biggest thing, and I don't think this is the biggest question that I don't think we're going to be able to answer, is that when are we going to start to see some of these numbers? I know that sales tax and all that was pushed back to, I believe, was it July 15th?
So that's the, July 15th is the filing for, the March, when all this kicked off, they pushed back the first round of sales tax payments, deferring it for a month.
Mm-hmm.
But then with everything closing, we won't see that. We normally see those funds in June. We won't see them till July. It looks like with again, if they deferred the collection, that means they're extending that time period, because usually it's business 1 month, state the next month, disbursement to the village the third month. So there's always that time lag. So when that increases, that puts us in a cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where you're going with
Right.
this, and that we got our reserves to cover us for the cash flow.
If I can step in here.
Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, anything income tax related has now been pushed off to July 15th for a filing date. So we get a share of income tax, what we refer to as the local government distributive fund, LGDF. That's our income tax line. That will be in part a cash flow timing issue, because tax deposits that would have been going into the state's coffers in March, April, May, and June now are being deferred to July. So again, that becomes somewhat a little bit of a timing issue, but also will be an overall revenue issue, because actually it won't. It's not so much, because at this point you're reporting income from 2019. So the current crisis is not necessarily going to impact that until 2020. And so again, there points out where the impact goes into yet our next fiscal year as well. Now the sales tax, they've done something similar. Businesses who have, I believe it is $75,000 or less in taxable sales, have a similar deferral for reporting, or not for reporting. They still have to report their sales taxes on a monthly basis, or whatever reporting period they report on. However, their payment is also deferred to, I believe, July 15th.
Thank you, Brad.
So I guess my, and I know, I think the prudent way to do this would be to, as soon as we get a glimpse at those numbers, that we reevaluate, which I know we said we were going to do in 60 days. I think, I agree with, what Trustee Glatz and Trustee Berg and Brady are saying, but I think, the sooner we can get a glimpse of those numbers, the more, valuable of a decision we can really make, and, you know, kind of going forward, so we can accurately make sure we're maintaining our core services here in the village. So, without, you know, giving up any of our, like I said, our core services to our residents, which I think we owe to them. So that's all I have.
August 4th, Bill, I believe, will be the first meeting in August. That would give finance 2-3 weeks to hopefully have some type of numbers.
Well, as again, the reporting requirement doesn't go away. It's the actual dollars that are that's the bigger deferral. And again, we are working with our counterparts in other communities, as well as the folks that we know in the state, to try and get as much information as soon as we can. And again, this is something we will continue to share with the board. This is going to be a living, breathing document, whether we like it or not, for the next 6 months plus. So as soon as we get information, we will work with the manager to communicate it through, so that we are all going to have the same information and our finger on the pulse, so we know what's happening once revenues start happening, or excuse me, once revenues start coming in and we see what the impacts actually are.
Thanks, Andrew. Is that it, Bill?
Yep.
Trustee Galante?
You know, I feel the same as what Bill was saying. Should be the last thing we look at is cutting our salaries. But I think we have to react. I don't think, you know, I think if we have services that cannot happen and people have no work, we have to consider how to handle that. Either move into another role or make a change. You know, it wouldn't be right. You know, bottom line is our taxpayers, our voters, everybody is also affected by this, and people are losing their jobs and are getting unemployed. We have to react, I think. But again, I'm with you. It should be the very last thing we're doing. And I don't, and I think, I don't know what we want to talk about here. I don't see the big savings on some of this. I don't even see it's realistic. Some of these cuts are, I'm not sure how they're could be possible in our police department. You know, I want to understand how they're going to get to this. They're going to cut all the salaries out. I want to understand how are they going to get to that, and I'm still going to feel safe. We can't cut our services. I feel like at this time, we need probably more services from our police. The news is talking about, you know, domestic violence on the rise. There's a lot of issues that are going on. To cut those you know, we're looking at here, you know, what I've been saying on this stuff is, I'm not agreeing with a lot of these cuts. I don't think they're realistic.
Well, again, I want to reiterate that these are not cuts that don't come back. We've taken the approach, and to keep this in perspective, that these are temporary reductions. That's the purpose of these reductions. And I won't say that there isn't an aggressive proposal on our part. We want to make sure that we give the board the opportunity to make the needed reductions temporarily that prevent us from having to make even more severe reductions further down the road. And again, we worked with the departments. We, again, focused on core services. So we want to make sure that we are providing our residents, as Trustee Brennan was alluding to there, that we are providing with those core services that they need, and that we are there. But again, these would be temporary until we get back to the revenue, to build back our revenue, really, so that we can get back to offering those service levels that we did prior to the pandemic, which were above just core services. So just as a perspective, these are meant to be temporary, not into perpetuity. And within that perspective, we want to be able to roll these back on and increase these budgets back to their pre-pandemic levels once, again, we have the revenue to support it.
Thank you, Andrew. Is that it, Diane?
Right now, I think, yeah, because
Trustee Mueller?
Yeah, on the capital and operational side that we just went over, I think we've made a lot of good cuts. All of them look to make a lot of sense. I wish we would have been able to make more and got done with all of our cuts that we needed, just from the capital and operational side. On the personnel side, I agree with Trustee Glotz. Trustee Brady, I think everyone's kind of mentioned this on the board. I completely agree. I'm gonna be looking for a top-down approach where we do something and then hopefully we could spare as many jobs as we can, and keep people employed here at the village and ready to start working again at the end of the pandemic.
Great, thanks, Mike. I mean, you gotta lead by example. Clerk Therian?
No, I'm in complete agreement with the top-down approach.
Thank you. Mayor Vandenberg? Okay. Move to item 4. Sure, go ahead.
How about availability on grants and what, what's out there that we may be eligible for, that we're working on, or, what's out there for us for grants from the federal government?
Well, the biggest grant that we're probably working on that's most relative to this is the Fema Assistance that we'll be able to apply for, and that, again, we're working with the departments to make sure we're allotting the time that we're putting towards the virus-related activities that the village is being proactive on, whether it's in Village Hall, out in the community, as well as whatever direct costs that we're incurring that are eligible. So that's something we're doing to recoup some of what we're actually expending to do our part to fight this pandemic. But again, with the Rebuild Illinois, we are looking at getting our first deposit from that program, which is essentially going to be a function off of motor fuel tax. That's the way that they're funneling the money from the federal government to us, and using some of those provisions for us to follow on how we can spend it. But again, as we've seen before with the state, when they run into trouble, they tend to cut back on what they provide. So we'll have to look into that. I don't think anyone is ignoring grants at this point for any purposes. There was a grant that we talked about today that was for related to firefighters, and we tried to see if there was a way for us to utilize that for any of the deferred costs of their capital equipment that we could bring back in. But in our conversations with Chief Reeder, it appears that grant is more focused on PPE replenishment and kind of targeted towards those more heavier hit areas with COVID, that being Seattle and New York. So again, gaining a stockpile of PPE is different than substituting what we're looking for if it were for some equipment for our fire department to fight fires and et cetera. So we will continue to look for grants as they become available.
Thank you.
Great. Item 4A, receive comments from the public. Were there any public written comments received by email or via Dropbox at the Village Hall?
This is Attorney Paul O'Grady. No.
Are there any requests for telephonic public comments from anybody for today?
Again, this is Attorney Paul O'Grady. No.
Thank you. Item 4B. I'll make a motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss the following. A, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. B, collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. Do I have a second?
Second?
This is Trustee Berg. I'll second.
Thank you, Cindy. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Trustee Berg.
Yes.
Trustee Brady.
Yes.
Trustee Brennan.
Yes.
Trustee Galante.
Yes.
Trustee Glatz.
Yes.
Trustee Mueller.
Yes.
President Vandenberg.
Yeah.
Yes.
Motion carries. We will be going into executive session, and we will not be coming back out. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.